Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Ark. This video will conclude my series on the digital age, though I of course plan to return to this topic as further symbolism arises and as I gain further insights. In this series, I have tried to establish the archetypes which are active in the collective unconscious of modern man, manifest in particular in the ideas and behaviors associated with the internet. Thus far, I have focused primarily on the Oedipal myth which modern man seems to be acting out, that of the digital mother and the pod man. Whether it be from the internet, corporations, the government, or systems of ideological belief, modern man gives up his strength, his health, and his creative drive to the archetypal, devouring mother in exchange for being allowed to remain comfortable, weak, and in an extended state of fantasy long past childhood. In my last video, I discussed the embodied, healthy, creative individual as a practical and philosophical alternative to the podman. I now want to discuss the symbolic centerpiece of what I believe to be the mythology of our age. Aquarius, the hero who overcomes the comfort of the devouring digital mother and raises himself above the podman, the hero who does not give his destiny and consciousness over to the machine, but masters them himself. Let us first look at Nietzsche's conception of the Ubermensch. The Ubermensch is above, he is over, he is higher and greater than modern man. He has surpassed humanity, he is a man of the stars, he stands among the constellations, among the gods and demigods, and looks down upon the earth. In Thus Spake Zarathustra, Nietzsche wrote, "One must still have chaos in one's soul to give birth to a dancing star." The Ubermensch is that dancing star. He is a man of the heights, of high peaks, of triumph, of overcoming, of going over, and of going under. His deeds are joyous, noble, and carefree. Nietzsche wrote, "I would only believe in a god that knows how to dance." The Ubermensch is like Dionysus, dancing gaily over the hills, turning all he passes green and lush, igniting a frenzy of passion, song, and dance in all who behold him. The Ubermensch is beyond the value judgments of good and evil. He does his deeds not out of conscience or moral concerns, but out of pure, almost innocent drive towards life and towards overcoming. He has lifted himself out of the waters of morality. He has looked upon the frothing sea of morals and values from above, and seen how those caught in their storm are led astray. He chooses to leave those perilous waters behind, as our ancestors did. He looks up and begins to climb. He says yes to life. He says, "I choose my own values, and I choose to say yes to life unconditionally." He asserts his will upon the world like a demigod, not troubled by notions of good and evil, knowing only the joys and sorrows of destiny. "I love my fate," he says. "I love my destiny. My destiny is to surpass man. My destiny is to reach heights as yet unattained by life. I need no gods. I need no morals. I justify my existence. I am the meaning of the earth." And as he climbs, he is like a lion, gleaming golden in the sun. Nietzsche contrasted this image of the overman with the last man, a creature similar to what we would call the podman. He reeks of stale morals and sour opinions. He is something less than human, not under, not over, just lesser, just smaller. He takes pride in his littleness and delights in preaching his morality of comfort, equality, and justice. But in his eyes, there is only resentment, and in his heart, only revenge. His resentful ideology is a knife which he twists in the back of those who still love life, of those who still have overcoming in them. He is a tarantula perching in the web of the digital mother. The last man would rather return to an animal state than overcome humanity. He would rather re-enter the womb, the pod, than face the pain and hardship of reality. He would rather spiritually castrate himself than enter the inferno of his passions. In fact, no passions burn any longer within his chest. They are put out like a damp fire and give off only noxious smoke. The last man is no longer capable of giving birth to a dancing star. He is the ebb of the great tide, which is all of life on earth. Carl Jung was greatly influenced by Nietzsche. His vision for the future was that of the process of the psychological maturation of the individual, a process which he called individuation. Successfully undergoing individuation means to become oneself, to become an individual, to discover one's individual destiny. For Jung, the collective problems of humanity were all ultimately individual in their causes and effects. Thus, it is only in the heart of the individual human being that these problems can be solved. The fate of humanity rests on the individual's ability to brave the murky depths of their own unconscious, to be swallowed and yet to emerge again from the belly of the beast with greater understanding, and thus to transform all of humanity, as Christ did, as countless others did. To descend into the underworld like a Greek hero, to burn like a phoenix, to be crucified like Christ. Death and rebirth. This is individuation. Jung believed that the development of human consciousness could be seen etched into the heavens in the oldest mythology there is, the zodiac. Zodiac mythology all around the world tells the same story, that of the precession of the great year and the annual death and rebirth of God. The death and rebirth of God or the hero, the symbol which is at the center of the individuation process, is a mythology and ritual which far predates Christianity. The earth moves through the 12 zodiac signs each year, and this annual cycle is accompanied by the celebration of the death and rebirth of God. But in addition to this yearly zodiac cycle, the spring point of the earth, its very axis, is moving slowly through the 12 zodiac signs in the opposite direction. It takes roughly 2,000 to 2,500 years for the spring point to pass from one sign to the next. This is the cycle of a great year. Jung believed that just as God dies and is reborn each year, so he dies and is reborn with a new mask, as a new symbol, every great year. Jung noticed that the problem of good and evil was first presented to the human spirit at large with the birth and death of Christ, which happens to have occurred right as the spring point passed from the Aries constellation into Pisces, beginning the great year of the fish. It is almost as if humanity ate from the tree of the fruit of good and evil for the first time with the death and rebirth of Christ, and with the rise of Christianity, God split for the first time into good and evil. Christ, the ichthus, the fish, became Christ and Satan, and the Pisces sign, originally one fish, split into two revolving fish. These two fish, good and evil, swam for the first time in the waters of the unconscious as articulated values. For the last 2,000 years, good and evil have struggled for the human heart. Jung believed that we would have to unite good and evil to solve the psychological, philosophical, and spiritual problem presented to us in the age of Pisces. The modern man would have to reconcile Christ and Satan in his own heart. We are now entering the age of Aquarius, so let us look at the symbolism of the Aquarius sign in the context of Jung and Nietzsche's vision of a successful humanity. The Aquarius sign is a man bearing a pitcher of water. This pitcher bearer could be equated with Nietzsche's Dionysus bearing a pitcher of wine. Pisces was a water sign, but Aquarius is an air sign. The water bearer is a man of the stars. He is a man of the heights. He stands above the earth. In Jungian thought, water often symbolizes the unconscious. During the age of Pisces, man's values still swam in the unconscious, but the Aquarian man can look into his consciousness from the outside, like Jung did, and assess his own values. Aquarius, as the man who has survived the knowledge of good and evil, has become self-conscious, as Adam and Eve did. He bears and shapes his own consciousness for the first time. He is no longer submerged in the waters of the unconscious, of unconscious values, of unconscious morality. Aquarius possesses his own consciousness. He possesses his own values. Aquarius is Nietzsche's Ubermensch. He is Jung's individual who has made his unconscious conscious. Now, I would like to tell you about how I came to these conclusions, and why I've been convinced that this symbolism is not merely accidental. I want to show you that I'm not forcing this symbolism to fit with Nietzsche's and Jung's writings, because if the symbolic conjunction which I have posited is naturally occurring in the collective unconscious, if Nietzsche and Jung are correct, then the Aquarius sign will be the most important symbol for the next Aion, and contain within it the problems which humanity must struggle with for the next 2,000 years. Exactly 2 years ago, I began using Jung's method for active imagination. I have always wanted to be a writer, a storyteller, but I left high school frustrated with my writing, and with little actually complete. I had just discovered the works of Carl Jung that winter, so I decided I would try his method for active imagination to fix my writing. No more plots, no more elaborate plans, no more character development, just letting my mind wander, letting the currents of my unconscious guide me without interference. I decided I would write 10 short stories without giving any care to how bad they were. I hoped that something fruitful would come of it, if only one good sentence. But as I wrote, the same characters kept reoccurring, and seemingly of their own accord, these short stories turned into an elaborate plot, with surprises around every corner which I could not have invented or predicted. I would like to talk to you about the first and last stories in this series. The first story is titled The Sea Worm. It was 3 in the morning, and suddenly the image of a lighthouse on a stormy beach struck me. I began to write in a rush, as if following a voice within me. Scarce can it be called a lighthouse, and yet hardly can that cherished title be taken away, for without it, one would strain to find words to speak of the 4 sea-sun-aged walls that support, out of the unpleasant refusal to die that possesses old seamen, 4 wind-eaten planks, and atop them at last, a rusted lantern, and hardly a roof. Then the image of a young man came to me, stumbling down the beach, with a burlap sack. I wrote, each day as Gull bore the heavy sack along the beach, wincing as the edges of broken shells dug into the bottoms of his feet, the lighthouse appeared out of the fog, first as a dull glow in the ghostly mist, then as a lantern-bearing skeleton, swaying to the seething tune of the waves, and at last as a shuddering wooden structure, barely standing and barely distinguishable from the tattered wrecks of ships that littered the beach. I continued the story with as little conscious interference as possible, writing whatever came to my mind, however absurd it seemed. Within the lighthouse, there is an old man called the Watchman, who has hired Gull to bring him supplies each day, as he refuses to leave his post watching over the sea. The Watchman is in a rage. He says that the sea is angry at man for tarnishing its waves. Once his tirade has subsided, Gull boasts that he is not a mere humble errand boy. He is the mighty slayer of the sea worm, but the sea worm was the Watchman's son. The Watchman flies into a rage once again and threatens to hang Gull, but then abruptly becomes calm and says the following: I apologize deeply for calling you a fool, and for saying that I would laugh when you hang. I will not laugh, as the hanging of a man is always a very serious matter. And I give you my apologies too for my harsh tone. My old temper took a liking to you, as you resemble so closely my first son. But the matter remains. You simply must hang yourself. If you do not hang yourself, the sea will be unappeased, and the ocean will rise, and I, humble watchman who cannot leave my post, will be drowned, and my eyes will rot or be eaten out by fish, and I will no longer be able to keep watch. And in my absence, the sharks and other carnivorous fish will gorge their bellies and take their meals too often, and the oceans will be picked clean of prey, and the carnivores will starve or tear each other apart, until only Balthmus, the largest of all the ocean beasts, with 14 tails and 300 eyes, remains. He will not give himself easily to death. He will rise from the water and devour all the creatures of the land, and make a feast of elephants, cows, boars, and lions. But when the supply of land animals is exhausted, he too, having no whales and sharks to feast upon, will perish slowly of starvation, and in his belly the little glowing fish that dwells there and nourishes itself off of the suckers of sea stars and the tips of the most delicate and colorful of fins will die, and his pulsing light will flicker out, and the star who gave the fish its powers will feel the loss and will weep for the little fish, and the skies will rain, and his tears will wash the soil from the earth and lay bare the rocks, and the humans who had hidden from Balthmus will be washed from their caves, until only you, part-time ship hand and errand boy of the Watchmen, remain on this lonely rock. Then you will cry out, "How could I let such unspeakable terrors ravage my dear earth? Killer of the sea worm and mighty hero that I am, have I still no power against fate?" But you will be answered by silence, and without the sea to cool the earth, it will begin to boil under the heat of the sun, and you will sink into the molten star that was once your home, and wonder what unforgivable mistake brought you to the doorstep of such a hell. And so you see, there's no way around it. You have no choice but to hang yourself. Your responsibilities as a hero, and the very destiny of the world and of the human species, and of every other creature, plant, or animal that clings to this planet, compel you to do so. With this speech, the Watchman convinces Gull to hang himself from the lighthouse roof, and the story ends. Gull has been convinced to sacrifice himself for the greater good, to sacrifice himself to save the world. But it is clear that this sacrifice is futile, and the Watchman is simply exacting revenge for his slain son. This plotline continues in the final story of the series, called The Ark. Gull is saved by a lightning bolt just as he is about to hang. I choked with joy as I felt my heroism tightening around my neck, but as I reached the end of my rope, nearly dancing in the air, with glee, lightning cleft the sky, and with the hiss of pulverized wood, I fell free and was swallowed by the waves. Nietzsche often referred to the Ubermensch as a bolt of lightning. He wrote, "Behold, I teach you the Overman. He is that lightning. He is that frenzy. And I am a herald of the lightning and a heavy drop from the cloud. And this lightning is called the Overman." Gull is washed away in the great flood. 3 times he manages to board the Ark which the Watchmen built to save humanity from the flood, but 3 times he is thrown back into the ocean by the Watchmen. During these encounters, the Watchman reveals to Gull that he is his father. The sea worm was Gull's brother. The contrast between the sea worm, a half-worm, half-human sea creature, and Gull, whose name refers to a seabird, a creature of the air, is similar to Nietzsche's contrast between the Ubermensch and the last man, 2 brothers. Nietzsche wrote, "You have come from worm to man, but much within you is still worm." The 3rd time Gull is thrown from the Ark, he is swallowed by Balthmus, the Leviathan creature who is pursuing the Ark. In its belly he finds not 1, but 2 fish, 1 dark and 1 light. At that time, I was just beginning to become interested in astrology, but it was not clear to me why I had made the alteration of 1 fish into 2, or further, why Gull decides to swallow those fish. Upon swallowing the 2 magical fish, Gull gains immense power and energy, and erupts from the mouth of Balthmus, just as he is about to swallow the Ark. Gull then bears the ark on his shoulders to safety, up the last mountain which has not been submerged underwater. Analyzing this story later, I realized that the two magical fish which keep the world turning and get their powers from the stars are the Pisces sign. They are Christ and Satan. It is only by swallowing these fish that Gull gains the strength to save life on Earth from the flood. He must not board the ark, he must bear it on his shoulders. Gull is Aquarius, and the ark is the pitcher of water which he bears. You too must overcome the sea worm, the last man, but you must not boast of it, for the sea worm is your brother. You must not be convinced to sacrifice yourself for the supposed greater good. The Ubermensch will save you from this, like a bolt of lightning. He will teach you to make yourself stronger, to become a man of the stars capable of summiting great heights and bearing great burdens. But as Jung taught, you must first enter the waters of the unconscious before you can rise above them. You must enter the belly of the Leviathan and swallow Christ and Satan. You must be able to stomach good and evil and unite them within you. Only then can you find the strength to bear the ark of consciousness, the ark of life, out of the jaws of the Leviathan. Only then can you save humanity from the flood. You are the water bearer. You bear the ark on your shoulders. The further strengthening and triumph of life, the further deepening and expansion of consciousness depends on you. A flood is coming, and you are the ark.